Welcome, everyone. It's another special episode of the Buck Stops here, and you can't have a buck stopping here without a buck. I'm that buck. That'd be me, Kirk Buchner, owner, operator of NotInHallOfFame.com and the United States Athletic Hall of Fame. Which, Paul, you, I was hoping you could be on the show where we were the announcement show. Unfortunately, you were a little under the weather that day, but you're going to be part of the voting process for the upcoming one, where we're going to put forth a great ballot for you to vote on. And then we put that vote out there for all the people to vote on. So Tiger Woods is on that ballot. I don't know if he's good enough for you.
Yeah, I don't know. He might have a
So
tough time.
yeah. So what we're talking about there is the United States Athletic Hall of Fame, www.theusahof.com. But that's not what we're here to talk about. Every time there's big news in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, I bring on my favorite person to talk about that with, Paul Lawrence. How you doing, brother?
Good. Well, Happy New Year. And as you notice, I found an old postcard version. There's the Hall of
Good.
Fame with a little bit of snow there. I don't know whether it looks like that there today, but it probably does because,
Okay.
Happy New Year to everyone for a brand new year and of course at the beginning of the year for us Pro Football Hall of Fame fanatics.
Mhm.
We're getting close. We're getting close to the class announcement coming up. So
Yeah.
yeah, we had some recent news that we waited on, and kind of the last major announcement we're having in terms of all these we've had since last summer, all these different subcommittees and count, from larger numbers to the semifinalists, and we finally got a kind of last big announcement before the election happens in a week or two is that we finally got our modern finalists announced.
We do. And there's a couple nice surprises.
Yes, there was, and I think it's a great group. We're going to go into that a little bit here, and I think yeah, overall, from my view, and you share it, and many others in our little subgroup who looks at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, generally feel pretty good about it. We're going to talk about a few unfortunate exclusions, but overall, yeah, I think it's a kudos to the voters. It's a tough process to go
Hmm.
from 160 down to 50, down to 25 plus, and then down to 15. But overall, yeah, I think we got a nice mix here, and it's good to see some new faces in that group.
Yeah. And then it's going to be even harder for when they go down to,
Yeah.
well, what used to be five. I'm going to let you explain to everyone why it's not five, because I think there's some people out there who still don't understand why the Pro Football Hall of Fame shrunk and why there was only three people who had got inducted last year in the modern category.
Yeah.
And I think there were some voters back then, like of the 50 voters who didn't quite understand it. I'm sure they do now, but I've seen some very prominent sports writers who maybe don't spend the amount of time on the
Yeah.
Pro Football Hall of Fame that we do, because that's may not be their beat, of course. So, but just why is it much harder, Paul?
Yeah, well, for many, many years, we would have this stage of down to the 15 finalists. That's been in place for decades. And as you know, under previous rules, we would normally expect it in many, many years. In fact, for about 20 years and prior to the class last year, we would get five modern out of the 15 elected. That's kind of what everybody expected. And the legacy of that might be what you're referring to is those in the sports media or even football writers or journalists who aren't voters, are always still thinking about the mindset, well, we're going to see five. I think the thing that confuses folks a little bit about that is the Hall of Fame bylaws say a maximum of five. That's where maybe some people are picking up, okay, it's a maximum of five, and all those years we had five. But as you pointed out, under the new rules that started the last election, the class of 2025, there were only three moderns from that group of 15 that a year ago that got in. And that's because the hall changed this process. They used to count down from 50, they would meet, they're going to meet virtually in a couple of weeks, all 50 voters. They're present all the cases to be presented, and then they go through these cut downs used to be from 15 to 10 to 5. And then at the 5 stage, they would vote one final time. If you got 80%, you were in. And many years, all five of those guys got in. But the math is different now. They still count down to 10. They will then count down to 7. Again, one more discussion among the group about that 7. And then they can fill out a ballot with as many as 5 names. But the math begins to come into play because if there's 50 voters and they can each vote for five, that's 250 votes. Our good friend Jack Silverson, he really dove into this a year ago, and one of the ones pointing out the math is, yeah, you could get two or three guys who get the 40 out of the 50, which is the 80% minimum. But there ain't a lot of other votes to go around that end up getting split between others among those seven, and that's how we ended up with three. Now, there was some rumor last year that maybe we were very close, a handful of votes to getting four modern, but it doesn't seem like five is realistic. And going into it this year in the same process, I think a lot of us expect three, and we're hoping for four, but
Yeah.
not five is probably not going to happen.
And I think it's going to be lather, rinse, repeat of last year, mainly because this year we got two megastars who are entering the ballot for the first time, who you would think would be
Yeah.
on the would be on that five of the seven available. So they're going to take
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
spots.
Well, that's how yeah, now this is how the math is kind of works in their favor in a sense. A lot of this process we look at that we call the first ballot guys, right? The first year they're on the ballot.
Mhm.
Some years you can have one, two, three, or four of these names, and sometimes you're like, these guys are going to get in.
Mhm.
And there's sort of an all consensus. There's really no dispute about it. So they're going to get 40. They may get more than 40 votes. Again, every vote they get above 40, they don't need, but they take it away from the pool of the total votes. And this year we have two of them. And we're going to talk about in just a minute. And those are definitely what we call a lock. And so if we're looking at a class of three or four, we've already accounted for two of them out of that 15.
So we
And then
suspect.
yeah, then things are getting really difficult for
Yeah.
the rest of them.
Well, let's talk about. Do you want to do this by position or do you want to do it by
It's
eligibility?
your show.
Well,
However you want it to flow is fine
well,
by me.
you're my special guest, so uh, I'll do it by position if that's all right.
That works.
Okay. Well, the first lock is Drew Brees. I can't see how he doesn't get in right away. And at quarterback, joining him as a finalist is returnee Eli Manning. The only person who did not make the cut is Philip Rivers. I'm not sure how the timing sort of worked out, whether some of the voters, when they cut from 25 to 15, because Philip Rivers made his comeback 3.5 weeks ago as of this record, actually almost 4 weeks ago as of this recording, when he announced his return. So it potentially, and I don't know this for sure or not, some people
Yeah.
might have said, well, his clock's just going to restart anyway. I'm not going to vote for him. But I guess technically they could have. I don't know if they pulled it by the time.
Yeah, we don't know, Kurt. You're right. You're right. The Hall indicated that he would no longer be eligible as soon as he took the field, or actually when he was on an active game day roster for that first game that he ended up playing. We knew right then that he was off the ballot. He was one of the semifinalists, 26. So I don't know the process of whether the vote Hall told the voters were pulling his name before they submitted their ballots. Maybe some of those ballots went in. Regardless, you're right. He's not on this list. He wouldn't have been a contender, and his clock resets. So we're talking about Philip Rivers more in 5 years from now, unless he comes back and plays some more. It doesn't seem like it. So his discussion is for a later day. But what is interesting is I think we agree he might have had a shot to be in the 15. It's possible. And maybe his exclusion opened up a slot for someone else that we're going to talk a bit. But you're right. Otherwise, we've got two really interesting guys who have ties to one another in terms of kind of the San Diego kind of connection, if
Yeah.
you want to call it that. So,
All three
we've
of them,
got
really, if you count Rivers.
yeah. It's kind of weird, isn't it? It's kind of a crazy
Yeah.
thing to think of all that mix in those three particular guys. So yeah, of this group, there is no doubt that Drew Brees, you look at all of the accolades, the statistics, he played in an era, right, which kind of a lot of the quarterback sort of focus was sort of sucked up by guys like Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and a couple others. But he's up there, and he certainly the number of 5,000 yard seasons. He lacks sort of the league MVP, all pro stuff. But again, we talked about the guys he was up against at that position. He has the Super Bowl MVP. He just has it. It's all there. There's really no major flaw in that case. And you know, we're getting this just a second, but he's a quarterback that's well positioned in this particular ballot. That helps as well. Now, Eli Manning, again, we knew the day he retired that this was going to become a topic. I predicted then, and it's true, that there's been a split among how people in the media and especially the voters view his case. We
Mhm.
heard some of that when he first retired, kind of projecting whether he'd be a Hall of Famer. And then it quieted down. And then, of course, a year ago, he was first ballot. And it all started up again, right? He's got his strong advocates, we know that, including some of the voters. But we also know publicly comments from media, including voters who often don't say much about candidates as they go through this process. But there were a few of them. They're like, no, there's a lot of flaws in Eli Manning's case. And so we knew a year ago it was sort of contentious, split, a little controversial as to whether but he made it to the final 15 last year. That's as far as he got. And here he is again on this ballot. I don't know whether a year later is going to change enough of the voters to move him very far in the process. He has another quarterback on that ballot who's going to, yeah, take a bunch of votes and some other guys. And the reality is, as Jack, our good friend Jack Silverstein has pointed out, if you make it as a finalist your first year on the ballot, which is what happened to Eli a year ago, you can sit there and maybe you will sit there for years, and some players do, right? Because of we talked about the tough process. He's
Right.
going to get in one day.
One day.
I just don't think it's this year, and I don't think it's going to be for a few years. But he's there, and he'll suck up a lot of the media and the fan attention, which is kind of unfortunate. But that's just the nature of that player.
Yeah, I think what's going to hurt Eli for the foreseeable future anyway. Yes, last year he was a first ballot inductee, and to your point, if you're a first ballot not inductee, sorry, nominee, let me get my words right, you're going to get it eventually. I think the only exception to that rule is Jim Tyrer
Yeah,
for obvious reasons. Uh, but Eli's now not the best quarterback on this ballot. Uh,
exactly. That's, for our listeners here, that is one of the biggest differences between Eli's case a year ago when he was the big name quarterback, and the voters love the quarterbacks or receivers and running back. We've talked about that. They tend to get a little more juice among the voters. There are a lot of them in the hall that prefer to other positions for a lot of good reasons, and perhaps overrepresented in some cases. But that's the context he sat a year ago. He doesn't sit there today because he has Drew Brees. And next year it's Ben Roethlisberger, and then we're going to have Tom Brady.
mhm.
So it's going to be very hard for Eli to distinguish himself as the quarterback. Again, he's not going to go anywhere. I mean, in terms of he's still going to be there. Maybe he moves to the final 10 over the next few years. But I think we pretty much envision that he's going to sort of sit there for several years. And again, it happens. We're going to talk about some other really deserving finalists here today that have waited even longer. So that's not abnormal.
Yeah.
People say, hey, he's a Hall of Famer. He should be in. Yeah, a lot of these guys on the 15 are Hall of Famers and should be in. But the math doesn't, it's a maximum of five, and the math is going to give us three or four. People just wait. It's just part of the process, unfortunately.
Eli will get in. I'm an advocate for him getting in, but I think a lot of people in our group are an advocate for him getting in. None of us were advocating for him in year one. He's not a first ballot inductee. I know that some people will say it doesn't matter when you get in.
Yeah.
I'm going to say yes, it does.
Well, I think it does. It also means when you put him in, other guys are not getting in.
It,
And some of these guys have been waiting for several years. And if this thing is every time somebody comes on the ballot, well, okay, they deserve to get in and put him in as first ballot. That means that guys get left behind that are deserving and should be considered and have an opportunity, and they wait and they wait and they wait. Um, those folks also have the right to be there, deserve to have their cases, and deserve to be voted and considered by the voters to move forward. And we shouldn't always be in a rush to elect every guy who suddenly shows up per first year. And the whole credit last year, right? There were no first ballot Hall of Famers elected. And that's an interesting trend because for many years there was some debate among the media and even some of the voters that they were electing too many first ballot. And I think, last year's show, well, some years we don't need to do that. Well, we've already talked, we're going to get at least one this year, which is fully deserving of Drew Brees.
Yeah, and we could potentially get another first ballot and a coach if
Yep.
we're talking about that. But all of these people that we're talking about are all winners in every single. And if you made it this far, if you made it to the top 25, or in this case it was 26, you're a winner. As Hot Chocolate said, everyone's a winner, babe. Blue-eyed soul right here, brother.
There you go.
Yes. But if there is someone who, I don't want to say a loser, but someone who just took a step back, is we're moving along the positional board.
Mhm.
Fred Taylor is one of them. Fred Taylor, a finalist the last 2 years, and I, I'll be blunt for myself. I'm not a huge Fred Taylor for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I don't have a problem with him being in it, but I can only count on one hand how many times I thought he was a top five running back. Ironically, I can say the same for the guy who just took his spot, Frank Gore. But
Yeah.
if we're going to go by compiling, God damn it, 19,985
Yeah.
all-purpose yards. And on a position where you get the snot beaten out of you, he went to, I think, age 35. Probably could have gone another year, maybe, if someone would have took a shot on him.
Yep.
He's third all time in rushing yards. Yeah, the longevity is there. You got to be impressed by it. He's got the numbers. Does he have the cachet? And that's what I ask you.
Yeah, you sort of hit the highlights of Frank Gore's resume. And as much as people sort of sometimes are critical of kind of players who have a long career and they refer to them as compilers, the numbers there are impressive. And he has 9 1,000-yard rushing seasons. There's only a handful of players in the history of the NFL who have that or more, and those are some of the best running backs in the history of the NFL. So to play that long at that position, yeah, I mean he wasn't compiling these awards. He wasn't leading the league in rushing. He wasn't your first team all pro. But there's a lot to look at that when the guy played as long as he did at a level to be consistent, to have those numbers. Um, Kudos. And the thing is, the voters are not going to ignore a guy who's third all time, right, in career rushing yards. It's one of the most premier stats, in offensive stats in the NFL. So that's why he's here as a first ballot. I want to remind people about, if you don't know about the history of Frank Gore before he came into the league, that's also a fast. I mean, doesn't really play so much into the debate around him as his pro career, but that guy tore his knees, right? Twice, I think, as a college player. He may never played again. Nobody knew really what kind of pro career, although he showed flashes of it in college. He had some major knee issues that had to be knee reconstruction, all kinds of things. Kudos to a guy to power through injuries that might have just ended his career. He may never lasted very long because we know the average NFL career is what, 4, 5 years, and for running backs, it's even less. So that's an impressive feat of accomplishment. But you're right, he doesn't have that highlight reel. He doesn't have that playoff championship kind of, check off the box kind of criteria. We can look at the era he played, or eras, because he played a long time. Um, and you and I can come up with some other better running backs from that time frame. But kudos to him. And I don't think he's a serious contender, and kind of like the Eli situation. They're different, but in the sense that he's probably going to wait a few more years on that ballot. But clearly he's got support because here he is already the first year among the 15. And as you noted, moving him in, I mean, it's not, we don't know the numbers of the votes, but, you can look at that and the voters may say, we're going to put the majority of the voters obviously looked at, well, at running back, I'm going to move Frank Gore in, and less of them decided to continue with Fred Taylor. And I mean, Fred will probably come back on the ballot sometime. Not a year from now. We have another great running back who's going to be on this ballot as a first-time Hall of Famer. But Frank's well positioned, and they play a long time and they compile fine. But those are some impressive 1,000-yard seasons when you look at the position and the history of the game. And there's enough there for me to understand why the voters would move him ahead today, this year.
So in wide receiver, we had five who were semifinalists. Those dropping off: Steve Smith Sr. and Hines Ward, which goes back to my initial prediction many years ago. Hines would go 20 for 20. He would be a semifinalist 20 times. He will never be a finalist. Not saying he's not a very, very good wide receiver and deserves some serious consideration, but he is in a logjam position.
And you've been consistent on that, and I'm very impressed.
I have. I
You're
probably
all in.
ever met. I'm just reading the tea leaves.
Yeah.
And it just makes it harder and harder. And I just too bad. I like Hines. Just for whatever reason, his profile keeps going down and down and down.
Well, I mean, you just mentioned it, right? We have five wide receivers among these 15. And we've had this discussion year after year after year. And we look at these finalists, and we've lamented about the fact that there's a lot of wide receivers, and maybe they're overrepresented. I think there's an argument for that in a lot of these finalists and in the Hall of Fame and in the elections. And Hines has been caught into this sort of whirlwind, right, of a logjam at that position that goes back a number of elections, and it still continues. We have returning guys we're going to talk about here. We've got a really major name now joining the group. So it's a tough competitive group. And, again, when the voters are sitting down and checking off 15 names, there's probably a lot of voters who are like, if they get to five receivers on their ballot, like, wait a minute, I'm done. That's enough. And that squeezes out the two guys who were finalists before the wide receiver position, Steve Smith Jr. and Hines Ward. Probably because there's just too many, right, at this point in terms of the wide receivers. And some of them have been there for quite a while. The voters support them, want to move them forward. We're going to talk about those. That's it's kind of a positional issue.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I've sort of made that prediction. And so when that happened, I sort of like, what was my tweet? As Bon Jovi said, we're halfway there because this is
Halfway.
yes, living on a prayer. But the two guys who are holding him back, Tory Holt and Reggie Wade, and I say confidently holding him back 7 times as a finalist. Tory's grandfathered in because as another wrinkle in the rule we talk about, if you finish in the top 7, so the 4 people who didn't advance to the hall are automatically grandfathered in as finalists, which also makes becoming a finalist even that much more harder.
Right.
Since it's not possible for those people to fall off. Whereas Fred Taylor was vulnerable. And we're going to see that again, I believe, with another. I'm pretty sure we're seeing another one. So with Holt and Wayne, both similar, they have something that Hines has. They've got the Super Bowl ring, but they've got more yards and they've got more individual accolades. But the bigger wrinkle, Larry Fitzgerald. If Brees is a lock, here's lock number 2. Unlike Frank, because like Larry's like, I believe, was it number 2 or number 3 in all-time receiving yards?
I think he's 2.
Yeah, you're right. He's 2. He's number 2. And he's got the Walter Payton Man of the Year. Yes, he doesn't have a Super Bowl. No one's going to hold that against him. It's not his fault.
Yeah, and people may be shocked to find out. Go take a look. So this was done several years ago, right? The NFL put together their all-time century team, right? Their 100th anniversary team. And it's a larger team. It doesn't meet kind of how we envision a roster, but they have a bunch of extra quarterbacks. But there's a wide receiver on that group whose name is Larry Fitzgerald. He's on that list. I mean, that just shows the respect he has from the media, including many of the voters. So he is at a particular level of how we view receiver from his era and even historically, right? And I think he's got a lot of strong advocates. And what's happening here is, and we've seen it, right? He's leapfrogging, essentially. He's jumping on the ballot for the first time he's eligible. And then suddenly, boom, 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 he's jumping over these receivers we started to talk about, including the 2 that you just mentioned that have been on the finalist list for a number of years. And I think most people would say, yeah, he's not only going to leapfrog all of the receivers and kind of get at the head of that queue of the group, he's getting elected.
Yeah,
And that's no disservice to the guys we've been talking about. It's just he is a tier above. Now, and you're right. I think, Holt and Wade have been kind of competing for votes. I suspect it's been some split. The guy I feel kind of bad about in the situation really is Holt because not only has he been a finalist, he's been in the final 10 level for a few years. And of course, last year, as you mentioned, he was among the final seven that were on. His name was on that last ballot and didn't get enough votes. So he's kind of been frozen in time on this ballot. I think he's looking at a couple more years. I think he's got what I often talk about. Does a guy have a path to be elected? I don't think Holt has a path to be elected because Fitzgerald's going to jump him this year, but he's got a path because as a receiver, he's got a few years here where he's still going to be on that ballot, obviously. I fully expect him to be on the final seven again this year. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be. And that means he's going to be an automatic finalist next year. So he's going to wait a bit longer, but I think his day is going to come very soon, deservingly. Now, Reggie Wayne,
mm,
that's it's sort of similar to the Hines Ward kind of situation. I don't know when. I mean, because the ballot gets harder every year, it's going to be filled with other players, other positions. The class sizes are probably going to stay small for a while. So it's more of an unpredictable situation that he's in. What he needs Holt to get elected. That's what Reggie Wayne needs. And that's not happening this year, but soon.
well, I'm going to throw this out at you because I was going to save this till later, but now that the voters sort of understand the assignment a little bit better, and again, if any of the voters are watching, some voters did come out and say that they were a little bit blindsided by it or just didn't quite understand it, and I might have been one of them. Math is not my strong suit when it comes to sort of like doing the, because I guess that's more of a calculus or algebra. I don't know. I had a higher absence than Mark. I wish I was joking. That's actually true. But anyway, I would wonder if at some point, I don't want to say collusion because you're not supposed to. And
That's
since
correct. You can't do that. You can't do it before the meeting. You can't do it during the meeting. You can't trade votes. You can't. That's and the whole is really tightened up on those rules under the new bylaws that were created a couple of years ago. But I know what you're getting at. I think I agree with you too, Kurt. Is that they've seen this play out once. So kind of how an envision I see this going is, they talk about all these 15 guys. They're all presented by one of the voters, and then they're discussed, and then they do these countdown votes. You know, I envision this when they get to count down to 10 and look at that group, and then, as they move forward with this to the next vote, they get down to that seven. At that point, if I'm around the room, we're looking at the all set. Okay, our last chance. Go around the room. Here are the seven we're at. We're only going to be able to put five names. If I'm in that room and I'm an advocate, I'm going to say, listen, guys, I know we've got some different players you're interested in. We know a couple of guys that we're all supportive of. But if we want a larger class, we as a group need to coincide our votes around a third and a fourth candidate to get them elected, and somebody's going to be there to make a strong case to say who that might. I don't know who that might be, but that argument, not trading votes or trying to just putting down on in front of all the voters. If we want a class that's four, then we're going to have to someone is going to have to be the voice, right, to advocate for a guy to bring the votes together that otherwise might be split.
I think also too, let's say they don't actually even, you're not even, let's say maybe they can't even say that in the room. Maybe, and I'm just saying, if I was one of those people, it might enter my mind. So let's say Holt is in the top seven again. Knowing what we know about log jams and positions, and we're going to get to offensive linemen, which is another one
Yeah.
that's sort of piling right up. I would be very tempted to maybe jump my own personal queue and just think of a greater good, and then wonder if other people might do the same.
Yeah, I mean that's
No, I'm just throwing that.
especially yeah, you're right. I mean, a year later they know what the math looks like, and the challenge is to get more than say three elected. And you're right. I mean, we've probably all been in situations where we've been in a meeting, we've had to vote on some things, and you had to read the room. And you begin to read the room, in this case, the virtual Zoom room,
Which makes it
which is
harder to read.
harder, but you can get a sense of where is the passion around, let's say, a fourth guy we want to get in? And to be able to reflect on that, say, listen, that may not be my choice as a voter for my, put him down among my five, but I can feel the room and I can feel the kind of momentum for that guy, whoever that might be. That has to come more into play because otherwise we're going to end up with three again,
Again,
moderns.
in a virtual room, it's really hard to read people.
Very hard. You're going to have to pay attention. The visual cues aren't going to be there. You're going to have to pay attention to conversation, the passionate arguments that are being made, and you got to realize how many voters are speaking up for a person. And oh, wait a minute, I never thought about voting for that person, but it certainly looks like a number of people are. That's that kind of sense you're going to need to pick up on.
Yeah. And then you also got to wonder too how many people are going in there with a very closed mind.
It's 50 voters, people, and that's a lot of different views and opinions. And I think you're absolutely right. There's probably people who go in rather open-minded. There are people going in willing to change. They're willing to be convinced by an argument.
Mm.
But you and I both know, again, in a group of 50 people, kind of well, they're not random, but you know what I mean, 50 people, there's going to be a wide range of views. There are probably voters who go in, and again, no disrespect, they just made up their mind. They're like, I've done my work. I've researched this, and I'm going with these five names all the way to the end. And no one's going to convince me otherwise. Fair enough. I mean,
Uh,
that's their vote.
Here's another a guy who's a first ballot who should be, or first ballot nominee rather. We're going to our lone tight end, and this one is interesting to me because I think if he didn't come back out of retirement, his chances might have been better. And I only say that based on how the position around him has changed. That's Jason Witten. He is the only tight end here. He's got a lot of things going for him, but it's funny. The game has changed so much that back in his peak, there were still only a handful of tight ends that were putting up yardage. A lot of teams were still running with the tight end. Yeah, we're going to throw it to him occasionally. He's there to block. Now we are probably. I thought it was going to happen this year. It didn't. I thought we were going to have like maybe 5 tight ends with 1,000 yards. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And the longer Witten is on the ballot, the harder it is for him with Gronk coming on soon. Kelsey, it wouldn't surprise me if he retires this year. And now you got 2 people who eclipse him. So Witten, I have a feeling he's going to be on this ballot a lot longer than he should. Only because of how the timing is not his friend.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. He checks a lot of the boxes, and you make a very good point. I mean, his career is sort of the transition. I mean, yes, we had Ozzie Newsome, we had Kellen Winslow in the '80s, and we saw the progression of this position. It didn't happen overnight, but it changed a lot in the early to mid 2000s, right? And the guys we talk about, right, are Tony Gonzalez and Antonio Gates, who, by the way, was elected last year in his second year. He was not a first year elected to the Hall of Fame, but in his second year. So Witten's career overlaps a little bit with Gonzalez and with Gates, and they sucked up a lot of the All-Pro and the All-Decade kudos and accomplishments, as well as the stats. And then as his career was closing out, he overlapped with the guy you just mentioned, and Jason Kelsey. So and guys like George Kittle and a few other tight ends that are just, as you say, the whole position is really emerging in the last decade. And so he has that kind of cross career, but he played a long enough time at a high enough level. And I kind of go back to this point I made earlier, kind of like Eli, right? You make it as a finalist your first year on the ballot. That says a lot about how the voters view you. And they're viewing you saying, I think pretty across the entire panel of 50, this guy's a Hall of Famer. And it's going to become a numbers thing, just a kind of, it's almost like the Eli scenario, right? Is he's going to have to wait until there's a path to be elected. It's not going to be this year. It's not going to be next year because Gronk's going to be on that ballot here going. But, and then the ballot gets tight because, they're only electing 3 or 4 and we got more. But I think there's a window for him probably, 2029, 2030-ish, somewhere in there down the road that he'll rise through that process. He'll probably become the final 10, right? into the final seven as the years go on. So he's going to sit there and just have to wait for that kind of opening for the voters to be able to fit him in, so to speak.
Hmm. Well, the other position I was talking about with the logjam, and that's the O line. And selfishly, I kind of wish the three that advanced were the three who did not advance. And it's not that I necessarily have a personal preference. Well, I kind of do in one case, but realistically, the resumes of three of all six of these people aren't all that different. And I just want to talk about the people who fell off the ballot first. Steve Wisniewski, oh man, 20th year. He is now in the abyss of the senior pool. Raider Nation never went that hard on him. As Ron Katz, our friend, sort of told me in a text message or like a direct message, he said, like, can you imagine how different it would have been if there was no tuck rule? It was the Raiders would have advanced to that Super Bowl and possibly won it.
Yeah.
And then maybe Raider Nation sort of goes there. They're bigger on Phil Villapiano.
Yeah, as a senior candidate.
Yeah.
And Lester Hayes and some of
Well,
them are,
Lester, I get. I'm big on Lester too.
yeah, and some of them are just hung up on Jim Plunkett as a senior.
Right.
Um, yeah,
Wisniewski is never
yeah,
was never a finalist. I think he was only a semifinalist. I want to say three times.
not very long, and later in his eligibility. And you mentioned several factors here. Guard is a tough position. Voters are always kind of hard on the guard position. It's gotten better, but unless you're an all-decade guard, and we got a couple of them here, not when you see first team, that is, it gets tougher. And then years go by, he doesn't move forward, kind of gets forgotten. And
Mhm.
then there's this late push, right, to get him to a point where he's a semifinalist again with the hope that maybe he will make it into the final 15. And there's no room for him. It doesn't happen. And he's going to fall in that senior pool where one or two, and last year was only one senior got elected. That's really tough. It's unfortunate because he's got a lot of credentials, but you're right. He doesn't have the push from advocates from among the voters, the media. There's just not been enough push. The voters haven't really recognized, or they have and just sort of set him aside too long. And it's really too bad because he's the perfect example. We've talked about this, is a guy that needs to get in the room. When we say that, what we mean is the voters don't meet to talk about any of the candidates until the group of 15 of the finalists. And then they're presented and discussed one by one. And that's an important part of the evaluation stage of these guys. He's not going to get that opportunity as a modern. And not having it meant he was never presented, never got a shot. Because who knows, you get in that room, a lot of votes could be swayed by a
Right.
convincing argument and debate about a player. And they don't get that opportunity, and he's not going to get it, which is really bad. I've been a huge advocate for him. I knew he was going to have a tough time of it. I knew there were other guards coming on the ballot that were going to make it even harder for him. I was hopeful, and it just didn't happen.
Another person who fell off, Richmond Webb, friend of the show. Uh, Richmond is as classy as it comes. When he did not get on that finalist list, his tweet was, "Congratulations, guys," to the finalists. Uh, again, Webb was in that hard position, kind of like you just described. Finally made it to the semifinals on year 18. So this is you as year 19 now. Next year it's year 20. It's not impossible. At least when you become a semifinalist, you're more in tune to possibly advance further than you were before. Recency bias certainly is in play
Yep.
among the senior voters. We know that. Not necessarily the senior committee, but the people who are actually deciding it. But yes, so it's not over for Wiz and Webb. Well, but it's certainly become a lot harder. As for the other individual, Lomas Brown, Barry Sanders has been making a big push for him. That might have certainly helped him get to that point. We'll see. But Lomas still has, I believe, another 9 years.
Yeah, he's still got more time, and so that advocacy that you referred to is going to continue and is very well deserved. And again, it's a numbers game. How many offensive linemen, whether it's guard or tackle, And by the way, there are no centers in the finalist list here. It gets tough, right? How many of them can they fit in the 15? And some of these are returning. The biggest advantage for Richard Webb would have been if Willie Anderson got elected in the
Right.
previous years.
One of his
That's that
teammates left.
pathway would have opened because
Yeah.
the pathway would have been okay. The tackle's off the board. He's elected. Who's who's next to that position who we might want to consider? And it would have been Richard Webb.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen. And he's going to have to wait a year. And we hope for the best for that because he has a lot of advocates. He
Mhm.
has a good, strong, organized driven group that's pushing for him. A lot of he has a
And
lot of support. He's
let's
a
give a
great
shout out
guy.
ahead of that. We could, another friend of the show.
Yep.
Dan the man out in France. Because
Yeah.
sometimes that's where your biggest fans can come from, not
Sure.
your backyard. And of
Yep.
course, his last name's Marino, not the Dan Marino. But so I'm sure the whole dolphin sort of thing became, oh, well, how can he
Yeah.
gravitate towards that? I've never asked him that, but it's got to be. And he put
Sure.
together this amazing video interviewing a
Yep.
whole lot of people for that, like had a lot of voters even on that. It's a great piece of business. Check that out at Dan the Man 17. I think I got his handle right. I wasn't planning to do a plug, but for him. But it'll be easy to find. Just Google or YouTube Richmond Webb video for a Hall of Fame, and you'll find an amazing piece of business done by Dan out in France. But yeah, to what you said earlier, so it's the same three people that we had last year. Willie Anderson, who's again one of the grandfathered seven, and the two guards, Jari Evans and Marshall Yanda. Both Evans and Yanda with their Super Bowl ring. Both very, very well received. Both of them in year two. Both of them a finalist in their. Actually, sorry, no, Jari was a finalist. Do I have this backwards or no? Jari has been a finalist. No, this is his third time as a finalist. My apologies.
Yes.
Yeah, and Yanda's on year two. But both of
Yep.
them were finalists in their first year of eligibility. Anderson actually was not. So
Right.
he was one of those guys who sort of, I don't want to say came out of nowhere. I think in year five, I might have the year wrong, but he's been ever since he got there. He's been here. Clearly, he's the top of the queue. It's only going to be good for a lot of other guys. Should a Tory Holt, and I say the same thing about Willie Anderson. Good.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Willie Anderson was among the seven finalists last year, so he gets the automatic back into the finalist. The two other guards, they actually made it to the final 10, so they're kind of like a step back, but that's a step forward from the 15. So they're well positioned, and kind of like I said before, the best thing, I mean, different positions, but as offensive linemen, the best thing that those two guards could benefit from in this election, I think it might happen, is for Willie Anderson to get elected.
Yeah. Let's move to the defensive side of the ball, and
It's thin.
it
There's
is
less of
thin,
them.
but we're starting with a wall. And this is the biggest and best surprise. Uh, there were three people who were nominated as defensive linemen / defensive ends, and two of them of the three semifinalists, sorry, two of them had been here before as semifinalists that had never been a finalist, and Robert Mathis and Vince Wilfork. Vince Wilfork, who wears jean overalls with no t-shirt better than anyone possible. Absolutely. He's sort of like he's like a top 5 draft pick of who I want to hang out with.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
I'm not even a Pats guy, but he's right up there. But speaking of our resident Pats guy in our group, Evan Nolan, Evan has been big on Kevin Williams for a long, long time. And it's not hard to see why. Just a quick look at Pro Football Reference, 5-time first team All Pro.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, on year 6 of his eligibility, year 6, I think I got that right, he becomes a semifinalist. And then he leapfrogs over Mathis and Wilfork, and he should. No, and all due respect to Mathis and Vince, I like them both. But Kevin Williams it's like a forgotten treasure that was shining right in your eyes the whole time.
No, that's a great analogy. And a lot of us were wondering what was going on? What was the issue? Because when you check the boxes on the resume, it's all there. But where was he and why weren't the voters more attuned to his case? And so it's been a very pleasant surprise and for a lot of us who follow the Hall And, many of us who have been convinced and heard the arguments for him and like, yes, Kevin Williams is deserving of that. I think it's been a really pleasant, probably the biggest pleasant surprise this cycle of election is to see him move from the shadows, and so to speak, into a semifinalist. And here he is in the 15, which is a great slot for him. It really bodes well. He'll have a wait, but again, he's here. He's made it that far. I think when his case is presented to the voters, it's going to be a very compelling one, which is going to maybe convince more of them to be aware of his case. And yeah, I think it's great to see. Certainly deserving. The accolades are all there. So that's really probably like I said, the biggest for me and for many others, right? The biggest pleasant surprise of this whole process. We hoped we might see it, but we didn't think we would, and yeah, here he is. Good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. At linebacker, we have the same two as last year, two very different linebackers. But Luke Kuechly, another grandfathered individual, former Defensive Player of the Year, is on his second year of eligibility, and he's joined with someone with almost the exact same resume, Terrell Suggs. Different, obviously a different type of linebacker. He was more of the pass rusher, but also a Defensive Player of the Year. And although he is a Super Bowl champion, won this. I always forget that he won that second one,
Yep.
Kansas City. I always forget that, but he's a finalist also in year two. I guess he's behind Luke because Luke was a part of the seven. Terrell is not. Both of them are getting in. We just don't know when. Terrell just needs Luke to get in right away because
Yeah.
unfortunately he's sort of blocked.
And if I was a betting man, and we talked about this, I don't know whether you could bet on this. I haven't seen any odds on it, but at any rate, um,
You can
the,
bet on the first ball, first pitch thrown on a random game. I'm sure
yeah,
you can bet on this.
somewhere somebody's taking bets on
Yeah.
favorites to make the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and the voters love to balance the class a little bit. And I look at this ballot and I think, who do I think is the defensive player on this ballot of the final 15, who's going to get a lot of attention from the voters? And that's Luke. Like, I mean, you mentioned, first year last year on the ballot, he made the final seven. He's got all the accolades. It's a bit of a shorter career that probably dinged him a little bit in terms of being first ballot a year ago. But otherwise, he checks all those boxes, and they're going to want a defensive player in this mix, I'm pretty certain. And so I feel pretty confident that along with Drew Brees and Larry Fitzgerald, that he's got a really good shot at being elected in this group.
I really want your opinion on this one here. So in defensive backs, we only have one that remains. Rodney Harrison was cut, and Earl Thomas, who I think is the best of the three, also did not
Yep.
make. He had some off-field issues at the end of his career, but bluntly, Thomas is the best resume out of all three of them. But now, if you're the one defensive guy, because there's a lot of reasons to vote for this, or sorry, you're the one defensive back left. You recognize, and specifically your safety, a position that I think the voters recognize we haven't done the best job on inducting. And we've got the only guy who's a finalist late in his ballot. So he's on year 18. So there's a bit of urgency. I see a bit of Eric Allen part two. I think this is the best ballot Woodson's ever been on.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think Eric Allen is a very good comparison. I mean, last year he was in his ninth year on the ballot as a modern. This year, Woodson, it's his 18th. So, and he moved quickly. I mean, relatively quickly, so to speak, through the process. And clearly, we've seen this before. Voters are aware of guys as they move them through the process in advance of knowing their time is running out. It doesn't always happen. And we just talked about a guy, Steve Winooski, that it did not happen to. But
Play Matt was the final.
it did for Eric Allen, and he's in. He got elected last year. So you're right. I think Darren Woodson is in that kind of position. He was in the final 10 last year. Um, they kind of made the messaging clear because they're moving him ahead of the other safeties that you just mentioned. He's kind of got that slot. He's got that path. I don't know. My hesitation here is it going to be a class of four? if it is, if the numbers work and the voters somehow get us to a class of four, that would make me feel that Woodson has a good shot. If we were talking a group of five being elected, I wouldn't hesitate to suggest that he might very well be one of them. But because the class might be three or just four, it's a little bit tough. But he's well positioned. What I would be most hopeful for, obviously, if he gets elected, that's great. He was a great safety with the Cowboys in the area of the 1990s. I've made the case to our group about him before for our Hall of Fame exercise that our group does. I think he's kind of all well positioned in there. But at the very least, I hope he makes the final seven because that really would lock him in. The next 2 years are tough, but there's still some room in there to squeeze him in. But he needs to keep moving in the process. He can't stall out, so to speak. So as much as I hope he gets elected, I do want to make sure be really exciting to see him get into that final group of seven. I think he's deserving. The voters, there's a support there. He's gotten this far. They've advanced him. They're close. They're looking for a way. Maybe this is his year. He's my sort of wild card in this process in terms of he could be in, he could be out. It wouldn't surprise me either way.
And sometimes there's always that one surprise. Like Eric Allen to me was a nice surprise. I enjoyed that. And I would enjoy this also. This leaves us with one. It's a simple story. Adam Vinatieri, place kicker, 100th anniversary team, the fourth of the seven finalists to return grandfathered in. It's just a matter. I don't think there's one person in that room who can make a case against him other than he's a kicker.
Right.
And where does he fit in a ranking? I'm going to ask you this, though, and I don't think this should matter. Would it be possible, because we're expecting, or at least I'm expecting, them to go both Patriots in terms of Belichick and Kraft, which my understanding is they vote for that after that. I didn't even know that until recently. Do they not want to go too Patriot heavy? I mean, I wouldn't make a difference.
No, that you're describing. I feel like my video looks like I'm Darth Vader, but at any rate,
I was going to go with Darth Sidious, but yes, the purple background may not sort of work, but that's okay. I think that might make you more convincing to a lot of people watching this.
Okay, we'll go with that. No, you're right. I mean that it's going to. I think they actually review the other group of five first. The coach, the contributor, and the semifinalists, but they don't know the results. They can only vote for three. They don't know who gets elected, but they can read the room. They're gonna have a pretty good feeling of whether both Belichick and Kraft are getting elected. They have a sense of that, and it could come into play just as you described, as it worked down the moderns. And I fully expect that Vinatieri will be in the final seven. Do they pause, thinking, oh, we're gonna have a class of let's say four moderns and two others at six, three of them being from the New England Patriots? Do they pause? Some voters might. That's possible. But I mean, we've had a first ballot kicker elected before. It didn't happen, obviously, for his case. So, and he's in the final seven. I think he's got a really good shot. And frankly, going back, we just talked about Woodson a minute ago. I really think that Adam Vinatieri might be the person who gets in and holds Woodson back.
Okay.
But
all right.
It could flip the other way for exactly the reason you just described.
Okay. So I'm going to put you on the spot.
Uh-oh.
No, you can change this later because I'm sure Jack, I don't know if Jack's reached out to you. We're planning to do our own little mock one, but we're going to do that. We're going to retroact it just to this one.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So we're going to be looking at doing that shortly. But if right now, because you might change this, with additional information, additional thought, who do you think, not who you want, who do you think they're going to go with?
I think it's going to be Drew Brees, Larry Fitzgerald, Luke Kuechly, and Adam Vinatieri. I think that's going to be our four class of moderns.
Okay.
Now, I never get this right. And as we all know, right, there's always look at my hand. Anyways, I won't do that anymore. I'm not using the dark side of the force here. There's always a surprise. Like last year, how many people predicted Eric Allen, right? There's always you can't predict the mindset of 50 or 50 voters. There's always a surprise. We don't know whether we're going to get four. We may only get three. I think we have a pretty good feeling about a few of them. So I feel pretty good about my four, but man, it's tough to predict. It really is.
I'm gonna go with the same first two, Brees and Fitzgerald. I'm gonna predict Woodson. I just like what I think they might do, and again, the voters have a heart. I mean, we saw that with the induction of Stephen McMichael 2 years ago.
Yep.
Was McMichael a legit Hall of Famer? I have my personal doubts, but we were there, and even though he wasn't able to make it, and his wife didn't come, it was still, it was really nice to see. And it was like, I'm not crying, you're crying. It was like one of those things. So I'm gonna go with Woodson. Just call it my hunch, or just call it the way I think it might just sort of play out based on how he's so different from everyone else. Because again, that wouldn't be my personal one, but I'm going to go with that, and then I'm going to go with maybe playing a little bit of strategy. Tory Holt.
Yeah.
As much as that's not necessarily the other two I would have behind. Personally, my votes at this point, although I wish I was in that room to sort of like hear some of the greatest minds sort of tell me what they think.
Right.
But as of this moment, my five, presuming this would be the seven, would be Drew, Fitzgerald, Kuechly, Vinatieri, and again Holt. That would be who I would personally.
Well, and Holt. They have to break the logjam.
That's sort of why
they've done it before. They've been in a situation where they've moved a guy ahead to break open a logjam at this position, and a couple of different elections going in the recent past. And they've heard his case, and there's going to be a lot of sympathy. So, like you said, emotion plays like, how long are we going to make this guy wait? He's got this far so many times. Put him through, get him elected, get him the honor he deserves, and we can move on to other players. That's certainly a strategy that I would be in the minds of voters. The question is, will be in the minds of enough of them, and it could be.
Okay. With that, I guess this brings it to a close. Unless you want to use the force or something right now, I don't know.
My lighting is really whacked out today. I don't know what happened here.
I don't know.
It was fine when we started, but now
I kind of enjoy it though. I can't wait to see how Ted makes the shorts of this one. It'll be really good. But I really certainly thank you as always for coming on and making the time, especially after you're probably tired from coming back from vacation, and a wonderful vacation at that, where you hung out with Sammy Hagar.
Kind of,
yeah. Well, Cabo Wabo, but that's still like I can just imagine David Lee. Like I think I messaged you like David Lee Roth just sort of like showing up there, like. I know I got that wrong, but.
Well, even Sammy Hagar, he's like 80, right?
Yeah, but he probably is he? I mean, he doesn't look it.
No, but he probably, I'm sure he still can sing and has a good time, but yeah, I don't know whether he still has the range anymore.
There have been I've seen some videos of David Lee Roth lately, and he does not.
Yeah, doesn't have the moves, doesn't have the range. But
no, well,
out there making a living. Can't complain about that.
I think the only few people who can sort of do that and just sort of sit down and sort of command is when you've got that sort of presence that doesn't necessarily rely on physicality. So like when Ozzy Osbourne did his last performance and he's Derek didn't make it look a difference.
Yeah.
I saw the Tragically Hip in their last tour when Gord Downey, you knew he was dying.
Yeah.
He's not moving much. It didn't matter. First, because he never moved much before.
Yeah. But the stage presence and the aura, excuse me, are all there and commands everyone's watching every move, and yeah.
Yeah, David Lee Roth had to sort of like be a bit of a clown prince up there. And if he can't do that, and he doesn't have the voice either, which he doesn't. I just didn't think I'd be ripping on David Lee Roth today. 1984 is one of my favorite albums of all time.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'll bring this to a close. Wherever you are, wherever you may be, make today count. Check out everything else that we do at www.notinhalloffame.com. So many things that we've been working on. Aaron James Freeman has revised the country music list. Check that out if you're a country music fan and see who he's predicting will be the next class in the Country Music Hall of Fame. A Hall of Fame that definitely believes in this, that Deion Sanders would love, because they only induct 3 people a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Deion's favorite hall. He just doesn't know it yet.
Yes.
Yep. So that is up. We will be, well, the USA Hall of Fame ballot, we're hoping that's going to be up for everyone to start voting on in mid-March. So I've got a lot of work to do on that. My God, I have my plates now covered in top of spaghetti, all covered with cheese. The meatball is not even able to fall off it because it's drowning in it. Yeah, I'm just rambling. I'll just stop. Wherever you are, wherever you may be, make today count.
And the force be with you.
Yes. All right, take care.